Pearl Buck once said, "If you want to understand today, you have to search yesterday." And that's exactly what we're about to do. Go back in time and realize how the 1920s were affected by World War I and how it continues to impact our lives presently.
Now, to better understand how the 1920s, specifically in Canada, were affected by World War I, we're going to give you a brief overview of the Great War. After beginning in 1914, an armistice was not agreed upon until November 11, 1918. Although fighting carried on for some while after, this formally marked the end of 4 very gruesome years, and the world's official modern war had come to an end. Throughout the years, Canada was a big contributor to the war. They fought in battles such as Ypres, the Somme, and Vimy Ridge, which were vital to the eventual outcome of the war. Overall, World War I was important to Canadians as it marked the beginning of the maturation process the nation would undergo, becoming increasingly more independent from Britain. Although Canadians were faced with the challenges following the war, such as adjusting to civilian life and the grieving process by the early 1920s, the Canadian identity that we know today began to emerge.
Following the war, Canada's economy was not doing very well, which makes perfect sense. Due to the huge war debts of European countries, export markets for Canadian products fell significantly. In addition, drought-like conditions in the southern prairies region negatively impacted Western farmers.
The United States and their high tariffs did not make it any easier for Canada, whose economy was based off of foreign trade. This resulted in high unemployment and increased bankruptcies, ultimately leading to many Canadians crossing the border to the U.S. By 1924, unfortunately, conditions were dramatically improved. Britain and Europe again had the ability to buy Canadian produce, mostly because of loans from the U.S. Increasingly, recovering European countries created a demand for Canadian products, such as pulp and paper and hydroelectric power. These new opportunities resulted in a surge of immigrants coming into the country to take advantage of the conditions. Also, looking at a political perspective, these wide swings in the economy were beneficial as they enabled the Canadian government, led by Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King, to play an active role in society.
As a result of Canada's great feats accomplished during the Great War, a sense of pride was established within the nation. Many individuals, because of this, began to display this passion and pride towards their country through art and recreation. The 1920s were considered to be the Jazz Age, which was brought into Canada by John Eckerson. The Canadian film industry began to emerge as well. Mary Pickford actually became a major film star in the U.S., being regarded as America's sweetheart. This encouraged many other Canadians to be a part of the growing industry. Finally, sports became more popular in the nation. Numerous Canadians, regardless of their gender, enjoyed watching and playing different sports such as football and basketball.
World War I was also a significant event as it led to many technological advances. As the Great War erupted, so did the need for new technology, so that soldiers could play a more efficient and effective role on the battlefield. World War I not only introduced new weaponry such as tanks, poisonous gas, submarines, and artillery shells, but also things like radio. Although the radio was invented in the early 1900s, it became more frequently used by Canadians during the 20s, as advancements led to the formation of radio stations and broadcasting programs. Telephones and automobiles came more into use during the time period. In fact, 3 out of 4 families owned a telephone in the 20s. with the introduction of automobiles, over millions of Canadians became registered users. This resulted in urban development, making many regions in Canada, especially the countryside, more accessible. In addition to that, farmers found use in technology being brought into the daily lives of Canadians. Machinery enabled farmers to produce more crops with less work. Overall, World War I and the technological advances that took place as a result helped eliminate the limitations of time and distance to Canadians. It also positively impacted Canada in a political, environmental, social, and economic level.
In addition to the boom in Canada's economy and the numerous technological implementations that followed it during the 1920s, some groups found this time period particularly difficult as they tried to find their voices. Three of the main groups include the Canadian women, Black Canadians, and the Aboriginal peoples. In spite of their great accomplishments in the workforce, women struggled to find their place in the rapidly developing Canadian society post-war. In spite of the tremendous progress women made, assuming men's roles as they fought overseas, they were pushed to the background when the soldiers returned. This time, however, they would not let up without a fight. This resulted in them working even harder to achieve equality for women and allow them to play a more active role in public life. Progress started off in the early 1920s when women were granted the right to vote and when Agnes MacPhail of Ontario became a member of the Parliament. The Persons case, led by Judge Emily Murphy, was also significant during this decade as women became constitutionally recognized as people in Canada. Black Canadians and Aboriginals were also fighting for equal rights in Canada. The 1920s were mostly enjoyed by many Canadians, and many viewed them as Canada's fun year. This is because of the strong economic condition and the introduction of the many activities and technological products. However, nearing the end of this era, the good times came to an end, when in 1929, the world stock market collapsed. This was mainly due to the factors of overproduction, high tariffs, and low wages that were caused by over-optimism and pride. This marked the stage of the Great Depression, a difficult period of time that would continue into the 30s and detrimentally affect people on a global level. No wonder the years to come were called the Dirty 30s. Overall, this demonstrates that World War I was a significant event that not only impacted Canada in the 1920s, but also the many years to follow. It just marked the beginning of this great nation's development. It showcases that history is what gives the present.